not just about black people, it's around us, but it's about everybody wanting that type of justice.
And started running, like jogging, and then turned my face, and then as I turned, I got shot in the cheek, and I went down to the ground.
Thank you so much for joining us for KVUE News at 5 tonight. Our top story tonight, 19 Austin police officers facing charges for their actions in the downtown Austin protests back in 2020. Those protests following the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota by a police officer and the shooting death of Michael Ramos by an Austin police officer.
Many protesters say they were subjected to excessive force by Austin police officers. Right now, we're waiting for Austin Police Chief Joseph Chacon to come out. He'll be talking about the charges filed, the indictments against those officers any minute now.
But let's first bring in senior reporter Tony Pilhatsky joining us here in the studio with more on this developing story tonight. Tony.
And Brian and Ashley, I just want to underscore what an unprecedented day this is for the Austin Police Department. Just moments ago, the union president for the Austin Police Association, Ken Cassidy, did confirm that now 19 police officers have been charged with crimes stemming from allegations of excessive force during those 2020 protests. The number has been growing throughout the day. Earlier today, we were able to report 9 police officers had been indicted. But as police officers and their attorneys have been increasingly notified throughout the afternoon, ordered to turn themselves in to the Travis County Jail, the number has now grown to 19. According to sources, that is going to be the number total, at least for the day and for this week, as the grand jury has largely concluded their review of those use of force allegations. All of these cases stem from the use of beanbag rounds that officers used during the protests to try to control the crowd. Officers also have said, and their attorneys have said, that they used those rounds also as they were getting attacked from protesters, that they were subjected to assaults that included rocks and other objects being thrown at them. Of course, one of the reasons that this number has been changing this afternoon is because under Texas law, until a police officer turns himself in or herself in to the Travis County Jail, those indictments remain under seal. But again, attorneys and other sources this afternoon have been increasingly confirming that the number of police officers has been going up. Again, the total now standing at 19 Austin police officers facing criminal charges amid allegations of excessive force during the protest. Brian and Ashley.
All right, Tony, while we've got you here, we're waiting on Chief Joseph Chacon. I'd like to ask you this. We do not know what the charges are for these officers. Will we find out once they answer to the Travis County Courthouse?
We will. Brian, based on legal experts that I've been talking to, of course, we first reported last week that up to 18 officers were facing charges. But legal experts say that these charges will likely be assault or aggravated assault. Felony cases. These are not misdemeanors. These are largely expected to be felony cases because, Brian and Ashley, the number of people who were injured received serious bodily wounds. That is the standard under Texas law for charging someone with aggravated assault. And so that is what we are likely to see, at least in a number of these cases. A short time ago, we also heard from District Attorney Jose Garza, who explained that many of the protesters who were injured were severely injured. And of course, we've been reporting that over the past nearly 20 months, some of them receiving life-altering and life-changing wounds. And the District Attorney, of course, underscoring that today during his news conference, explaining that the community should expect, according to him, multiple indictments that would be forthcoming. Again, now, just within the past few minutes as we were going on the air, the union president for the Austin Police Association confirming that 19 of his members now face those criminal charges.
All right, Tony Plahetsky reporting for us. Stand by if you would, Tony. We're waiting on Austin Police Chief Joseph Chacon. He's going to talk about the indictments, to what extent he can here this afternoon. We're going to hear more from him. Of course, we heard from other officials today regarding this. Again, specifics were not quite nailed down, but we do know, as Tony's reporting, 19 Austin police officers now being indicted for their role in what happened back in May of 2020.
You know, and Brian, earlier today, the DA saying that this is really about people's trust in law enforcement and ensuring that they're able to keep our community safe, that they can't do that if they don't trust police. You can see now that they are set up over at Austin Police Department to have this news conference. We're expecting the chief to walk out any moment. Now, one of the things that it is worth noting is that after all of this unfolded, Austin Police did announce that they were no longer going to use those beanbag rounds when dealing with protesters. They made some changes to the policies that they have regarding how they were going to manage crowds in protests such as this. You know, Tony is here. Tony, can you talk to us a little bit more about some of the other changes that they made within the department after these protests?
Yeah, Ashley and Brian, it really is worth underscoring that the cases that the grand jury considered were all the use of those projectiles, those beanbag projectiles. It is true that Austin Police did change their policy following the protest, and now we want to hear from Chief Joe Chacon.
Everyone, thank you for attending on short notice. My name is Joseph Chacon. I'm the Chief of Police. I'm going to start today by just letting you know that normally, you all know, I take questions at my press conferences or press briefings. I will not be taking any questions today because the amount of information that I have at this point is very limited, and I'm going to be making the comments based on the things that I know, and I felt it was important for this community and for this department to hear from me right now. It's an especially critical time. You can see that I have the entire executive and command staff of the Austin Police Department standing behind me right now, as well as City Manager Spencer Cronk and Assistant City Manager Ray Ariano that are here as well. And I wanted to take this opportunity to address the very recent statements made by the Travis County District Attorney. I have been intentional not to make statements out of respect for the criminal justice process and the grand jury proceedings as they have proceeded in this regard. While I respect the grand jury process, I am disappointed to hear the DA's press conference statements regarding anticipated indictments of APD officers related to the 2020 protests. As a department, we asked these officers to work under the most chaotic of circumstances in May of 2020 and to make split-second decisions to protect all participants. The size, scope, and tenor of the crowds was underestimated by management. Officers were prepared for hundreds when instead they faced thousands, placing them in potentially the worst possible circumstances to manage escalating crowds. While certainly not every moment of the protest could be classified as a quote-unquote riot, there were significant portions of times that the crowds were riotous and violent. Property destruction and looting took place over several days at the beginning of the protests. Rocks, frozen bottles of water, bottles containing bodily fluids, commercial-grade fireworks, and other objects were hurled at officers and into crowds in an attempt to seriously injure. If you recall, a recent federal court jury convicted an individual for attempting to deploy a Molotov cocktail in front of our municipal court building, which is attached to this building, APD headquarters, during these same protests. And I believe in many instances that officers were simply attempting to protect themselves and other protest participants. Additionally, the weapons provided to our officers did not perform in all instances in the manner anticipated. APD recognized this and now prohibits the use of less lethal munitions in crowd control situations. I am not aware of any conduct that given the circumstances that the officers were working under, would rise to the level of a criminal violation by these officers. We are at the beginning of the criminal justice process. As we move forward, these officers must be afforded all of the same protections of any defendant, including the presumption of innocence and the right to a speedy trial. I am confident that as these cases proceed, all relevant evidence, including hundreds of hours of body-worn camera video and other video sources, will be made available in court and to the jury. As we go through this process, I have been and remain supportive of the hardworking men and women of the Austin Police Department. I also want to reemphasize my commitment to transparency and the rebuilding of trust between APD and the community. Again, I'm extremely disappointed in today's announcement and will be waiting to hear further details from the District Attorney's Office. Thank you all very much for attending.
You've been listening in as Austin Police Chief Joseph Chacon addressing the indictments of 19 of his police officers today for the actions that happened during those 2020 protests. He was surrounded by leaders from the department as well as city manager and assistant city manager. He said that his information, of course, is limited, but that he is, quote, extremely disappointed by these indictments and by statements made from the DA, saying that his officers, the crowd size, they underestimated that crowd size. They expected there to be hundreds, instead there were thousands. But he said that he's not aware of, quote, any conduct that would rise to the level of a criminal violation by these officers, end quote. Of course, this is all continuing to unfold, and we're going to have much more information for you.